Hey everybody, I'm Don with Alpha Moto. We're here today to talk a little bit about one of their products called the Shock Air Pump. Okay, Alpha Moto offers a few different variations of this pump. The main difference between all three is the capability of pounds per square inch. How much pressure are they capable of building? So they've got a 60 psi pump, they've got a 110 psi pump, and they've got a 300 psi pump. Today we're going to demonstrate the 300 psi pump and also mention how it's a little bit more versatile. Today's modern motorcycles, very few models actually use air type suspension. A couple do, but the ones that do use a very high PSI, as much as 200 PSI, okay? These two smaller pumps are not capable of that, so today we're going to show some variables on the 300 PSI. Some of the older motorcycles, early 70s, 80s, even 90s, they do use fork pressure, and these are perfect for that because they're kind of a light pressure. It's a 10, 20, maybe even 30 psi, okay? But for today's demonstration purpose, what we're going to do is use this on a rear shock absorber on an older XR400. Now in this particular case, okay, this is the chamber reservoir for the rear shock, and normally these are filled with nitrogen, okay, through a nitrogen bottle, but they do tend to leak down. If you're out on the track or out in the woods and you don't have access to nitrogen, okay, we can use an air pump to satisfy that pressure because that shock will not work correctly without pressure in that bladder. If it's an older motorcycle, this pump would be used up here. There would be Schrader type valves on tops of the forks. So if you have a Schrader air valve there, which this one does not, because it's not quite that old, you would basically screw your pump fitting down on there and then set your pressure accordingly, okay? But for today's demonstration, we're going to go back here and connect to this shock. On this particular shock, the Schrader valve is at the bottom of the shock. You can see right there. One of the things we want to make sure is the threads on that valve are clean, and we also want to make sure the Schrader itself is working properly and not stuck. This has raised some questions with these air pumps in the past. You have to have a really, really good seal here, and this valve has to be working properly, or this pump's not going to help you out any. So we'll make our connection. If we look on the pump, on the inside here, we've got a small needle valve, and we've got a rubber O-ring. That rubber O-ring needs to seat tightly on this Schrader valve. Otherwise, we're going to have leakage. So let's just get this around here. This tool has a nice flexible hose. You can get into some tight spots. High quality. Has to be to withstand that kind of pressure. 300 PSI is pretty substantial. And as you can see, we're getting a good bite on there, plenty of threads. And you can feel that rubber O-ring kind of seat nicely on that Schrader. From here, what we're going to do is we've already got a little bit of pressure in that shock, about 45 psi, so we're getting a reading. This shock would require probably about 150 to 165 psi to work properly. So we're just going to make sure we don't have any binding or anything here, and we can just pump her up. This might take a few minutes at that PSI. If we were doing forks or something, it would take just a minute. But it is a very efficient pump. As you can see, we're just getting going here a little bit, and we're already at almost 100 PSI. Another question that came up with these pumps, some people had some concerns. When they release the pressure here, you have to release the pressure in this hose, okay? You will not hardly be able to get this off of here unless you release this pressure, okay? So we have a little relief valve at the bottom of the pump here, but what we want to do is just give it a quick, and that's it. Now the pressure here is relieved. We just give it a quick, okay? One of the issues that can happen here is if we don't get a good press and a quick release on this button, we can bleed the air back down through it. If you look up close and listen, see, I'm half pushing that button, and I've lost all pressure, okay? So That's not what we want. We just want a quick release, and we can unhook. And we have correct pressure in that shock. If you really feel the need, you can reconnect and just take a reading on the gauge. You don't have to press or bleed anything or pump anything. So that's the Alpha Moto air shock tool. Like I said, very versatile tool. Not a lot of the modern motorcycles using air forks anymore, but the ones that do are high pressure. This is the gauge to use.